Praise Yahweh.
Praise Yahweh.
Always, all things. Give Yahweh the praise for that pain in your back, for them calluses on your hands, for that headache. But blame the underworld, the subversion government, for the ringing in your ears, for all the frequencies in the air that are causing the ringing in your ears. See, there's certain things you can praise Yahweh for, but you've got to look for the evil behind the scene. Because the evil isn't going to be shown. It isn't going to stand out in front of you. For all things, praise Yahweh. But look for the evil that disrupts the land, disrupts the skies. Even the evil that's in our food today that disrupts our natural health. All the artificial ingredients. How can you get nutrition from something that is artificial? They sell you the pink and the blue and the pink and the white pill to convince your brain that your stomach's not really upset because it's upset from the artificial foods. But who cares? We're all on fluoride and we're all docile. And we're taking all the immunization shots with all of the impurities that they infiltrate microscopically into that needle. How much mercury can they get in that shot? Just a little dab of monkey pus. And I'm not even going to get into that today, but there's always something that comes out of the shadows that disrupts the lifestyle of the first world nationalities, which are the children and the descendants of the man called Israel. And if you remember in the lecture last time, there was 2 places in Genesis where the angel of Yahweh, and Yahweh himself told Jacob, shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel. But why do they keep reinserting the name Jacob? Jacob, Jacob, Israel, Jacob, Jacob. Every once in a while you'll get a hit of the name of the man Israel, whose descendants crossed the Caucasus Mountain, picked up a new name as prophesied by Isaiah, and settled Western Europe and the Isles, the British Isles, and Iceland. We cannot forget about Iceland. Remember, the Germanic people from Russia, all the way through Poland, into Germany, Czechoslovakia, they're all Germanic people. Even though they broke up into different particular nations, they're all Germans. All of Western Europe are the children of the man called Israel that settled there after Assyrian bondage, and then got a greater influx of Judeans after Babylonian captivity ended. But those are lectures for another day. I just want to bring to your remembrance the heritage of the first world nationalities. And we're even going to touch on that in a few moments. But today we're going to go back and make an attempt to finish the story of Joesph, Part 2. I'm Yahweh's named teacher, Ray Bunzow, please. P.O. Box 143, up please. Roscommon, Michigan, 48653. And today's Tebeth, the 28th, 7,517 years since Yahweh promised Adam to redeem, next please, the original sin. Now here we've got the genealogy of Abram, who was surnamed Abraham. And isn't that strange? Abram was renamed Abraham. And nobody ever remembers Abram. They always call him by the new name. Just like Apostle Saul. was renamed Apostle Paul. Nobody even considers Saul when referring to Paul. The point being, Yahweh said, "You shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel." But that's wiped right out of the books because of the vanity of the scribes that come out of the Latin and the Greek introduction of these 66 books. Now, Abraham had these 3 wives. Hagar gave him Ishmael, became the Ishmaelites, and became the tribes that would war amongst each other over in the Middle East. And then from Sarah there was Isaac. From Isaac there was Esau, the one that was hated in the womb. And there was Jacob. These 2 became nations, separate nations, because Esau adulterated his seed line, and Jacob stayed pure. And these are the children of Israel: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah by Leah. Bilhah had Dan and Naphtali. Zilpah had Gad and Asher. Leah had Issachar and Zebulun and Dinah. And Rachel had Joesph and Benjamin. Next, please. And just as an honorable mention, because we're going to be talking about the land of Egypt today, and we're going to start out in Psalms 105 just to verify the facts behind this genealogy chart. Oh, I know Timothy says don't look at the genealogy because it'll confuse you. It'll confuse you about the religion. This is not a book of religion. This is a book to a peculiar people, a history book, a law book, and a poetry book that tells you how this nation of the man called Israel is to have a prosperous life by sticking to the laws, statutes, and judgments. Now here we have Lamech's son Noah. Up here we've got Shem. Down here we've got Ham and the Hamitic nations. Now Cush turned out to be the Ethiopians that settled along the northern coast of Africa on the southern coast of the Mediterranean Sea. Mizraim, the son of Ham, are the Egyptians. And Phut are the Libyans. And Canaan is the only son of Ham that did not settle the northern rim of Africa. Next, please. Psalms 145. We're going to pick up a few lines here that's pertinent to the children of the man called Israel. So is Joesph. So this will all fit together by the time I get to the end today. First one of Psalms 105. Oh, give thanks unto Yahweh. Call upon His name. Now see, in the book it says L-O-R-D. And whether I speak it with a capital L or a small l, it sounds the same. And that is not a name. So how can you call upon His name if you don't have His name? Yahweh. And it's not Yah. Yah is a technical term for the tipping of a boat. Call upon Yahweh's name. Make known Yahweh's deeds among His people. Sing unto Yahweh. Sing psalms unto Yahweh. Talk ye of all Yahweh's wonderful works. Glory you in Yahweh's holy name. Now, every time I've mentioned Yahweh in these couple of verses, there's been a pronoun there. So, the vanity of the scribes can make you think whatever you want to think through the pronoun usage. Glory you in Yahweh's holy name. Let the heart of them rejoice that seek Yahweh. Seek Yahweh in His strength. Seek Yahweh's face evermore. Remember Yahweh's works and that He hath done, His wonders, and the judgments of Yahweh's mouth. O ye seed of Abraham, Yahweh's servant, ye children of Israel, His chosen. Now, this is very important from this point on. Yahweh is the King. His judgments are in all the earth. Yahweh hath remembered Yahweh's covenant forever, the world which Yahweh commanded 1,000 generations, which covenant Yahweh made with Abraham, and Yahweh's oath unto Isaac, and confirmed the same covenant unto Israel for an everlasting covenant, saying unto thee, and I will give the land of Canaan a piece of your inheritance. Now it says here, the lot of your inheritance. But it's a piece of your inheritance. And we're going to go someplace momentarily and show where there's someplace else that Israel's going to settle. Now we're going to jump right down here to set up that Yahweh has set up a covenant with Abraham that was inherited and confirmed with Isaac, and was inherited and confirmed with the man called Israel. Go down and we'll pick this up at verse 22. To bind his princes at Yahweh's pleasure, to teach Yahweh, to teach the princes senators wisdom. This is when Joesph was set up as the second in command over the land of Ham, Egypt. Israel also went into Egypt, and Israel sojourned in the land of Ham. This is in verse 23. Israel also came into Egypt. Now, if Israel's a landmass, how can it travel to Egypt? See, today, if you mention the name of the man Israel, nobody thinks of the people. It's always the landmass. Going on to verse 27 of Psalms 105, it says, they showed Yahweh signs among them and wonders in the land of Ham. Just to confirm what was on the genealogy table, that the land of Ham is Egypt. So all of the residents in Egypt, which is the land of Ham, are identical to the looks of Joesph. He has the same countenance, his face. You see the movies where the land of Egypt are all these brown and light brown and dark brown. If Adam was ruddy, which means to blush rosy in the cheek with a fair countenance, how can they be dark-skinned? If Joesph comes from the line of Adam, through Noah, through Shem, through Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, he has to look like Adam. Go back to Genesis chapter 30. We're going to recap just a little bit. And as we started the last lecture, it was very important to bring up the point that Proverbs 22 verse 6 stated to raise your children. If you raise your chickens, you want them to get plump, and you do a fine job. And if you're raising sheep, you want them to grow fine wool, so you get a good price. if you raise your children like you raise your animals, they'll turn out good, because they'll remember what they were taught in their older years, and they won't, if you don't lie to them, they won't be liars, because they'll know better. Just as Joesph, when he went in under Potiphar's control, he remembered things that he was brought up to know, because Israel trained Joesph to be the head of the household, and to remember and to carry on the covenant and the laws and the statutes and the judgments for the covenant that was to last 1,000 generations. Now, has it been 1,000 generations since Adam, much less Abraham? In chapter 30, it talks about the birth of all of Israel's people. Israel's the landmass. I'm going to try and avoid using the name Jacob today, because the book tells us not to do that. And as we saw on the genealogy list, Dinah was the son of Leah, and her name meant justice. And have you seen the movie that they just had on the television, the one-eyed indoctrination monster of the red tent, where they showed Dinah and how she lusted after the guy that in the book talks about raping her? That's in chapter 34 here. We're going to jump ahead and we're going to regress here. And Dinah, the daughter of Leah, verse 2, and when Shechem, the son of Hamor the Hivite, the prince of the country, saw Dinah, took her and lay with her and defiled her. Now see, this Hivite had been watching her and watching her and watching her. And they knew in the camp of Israel that they're not to intermix, because that was the law that Rachel set down to Israel before he left home. So that was a law, but the movie portrayed that Dinah lusted after this guy and wanted to go with him, and still her two brothers went in and slew all the men and the boys because they were mad, because Dinah didn't ask permission. Dinah didn't really have to ask permission. All she had to do was do it, because sex is a covenant between two people. A man and a woman are married upon the consummation of the sexual act of marriage, consummation. So, and the movie went on, and it had so many falsehoods. I watched and I laughed and I chuckled and I snickered to myself. And here it is, the poison wood, Hollywood. You know that little thing that the witches have to make their spells? Hollywood. Brought us out another falsehood, as a matter of fact. And here's reality mixed in with the myths that society is dealt with today. And then remember that Jacob, he had to work 20 years with Laban before he left. His wages, he worked 14 years for 2 wives. That was his bride price to purchase the wives. And then another 6 years, Laban must have had some Jew in him, or he learned from the Jews that lived around him. Because Laban changed in 6 years, now this is every 9 months, that Israel had his wages changed. And that's back in Genesis 31 down 40, 41, and 42. And then as we go on, we had the honorable mention in Genesis 35, 9, and 10, where Jacob wrestled with the angel of Yahweh all night and was renamed Israel. And then from here, if you want to get a little head start, I'm going to Chronicles 17 after I finish this. And Yahweh said unto Jacob, I am Almighty, be fruitful, multiply, a nation and a company of nations shall be of thee, and kings shall enter out of thy loins. Now, First Chronicles is the prophecy of this. First Chronicles 17. We're going to pick this up in verse 7. And this is the prophet Nathan speaking to King David. This is when David's inquiring of Nathan whether he should build the temple or not. And Nathan tells him, yes, you should build the temple. And Yahweh speaks to Nathan and says, you go back tomorrow and you tell him, don't do this. And we'll pick this up in verse 7. Now therefore thus shalt thou say unto my servant David, thus saith Yahweh, excuse me, I took thee, David, from the sheep cot, even from the following of the sheep, that thou shouldest be ruler over my people Israel. Didn't say his land Israel. And I have been with thee wherever thou hast walked, and have cut off all thine enemies from before thee, and have made thee a name like the name of great men that are in the earth. And I also ordained a place for my people, the children of Israel. And I will plant them, and they shall dwell in their place, and shall be moved See, the important part of this, and shall never be moved, neither shall the children of wickedness waste them anymore as in the beginning. They're already in the land of Canaan. Judah already has his territory, his land, as does Issachar and Gad and Simeon. Everybody but Levi has their little state. But why is Nathan prophesying in verse 9 of 1 Chronicles 17, I will ordain a place for my people Israel? Because he knows they're getting ready to fall away in the next few generations, and he knows they're going into captivity, and Yahweh knows that Hosea is going to tell the northern 10 tribes that there's going to be a hedgerow set up, and very few are going to return to Israel. So now that's the setup. Israel, go to the under the paper clip in the back there, if you would, please. Israel has never been a landmass until 1948. After the Assyrian bondage, the children of the man called Israel moved into Europe. You've got Iceland, which is Benjamin, Naphtali for Norway, Asher in Sweden, Issachar in Finland, Russia's Germanic, Austria-Hungary. They're from the son of Pharez. You've got Ireland, Scotland, this is Zara. You've got here the Netherlands is Reuben. Dan is Denmark. France is Zebulun. The white Spanish are Simeon. Now there's a demarcation point in Italy where the northern part of Italy up into Switzerland is the tribe of Gad. Now who did I miss? I missed Levi and I missed Manasseh. because Levi is not to have a land, but they're to administer the laws and the judgments throughout the nations, plural. And then Manasseh, back that over a little, please. Manasseh got the New World. Manasseh crossed the pond and settled the United States of America as the new gathering place for the New Jerusalem, where the children of the man called Israel would all have this land of milk and honey, with a great sea in the front and a great sea in the west, and all of the trees that only grow on one continent in this entire world. Go back to that other one, please. Now there's your setup. Those are the children of the man called Israel, the white Western European nations of the world. No, I didn't include New Zealand and Australia and a few others, South Africa, which are all part of the man called Israel's children. Now we're going to go back here and pick this up at verse 37 of Genesis. And Israel loved Joesph, 37:3, more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors. So when Joesph was born, all the rest of the children were up into their teenage years. They'd already made a pact together. They'd already grown up, as Joseph's just getting a start in life. So Joesph is the young outsider. He isn't part of the pack. And when his brother saw that Israel loved Joesph more than all the brethren, they hated him and could not speak peaceably to Joesph. And then you get down in here, Joesph has the dream of the sheaves. And he has another dream of all the stars and the moon and the sun bow to him. And little did they know that this would come to pass. All right. And so, on a particular day, Israel wanted to know where the 10 brothers are, because he sent them off to graze the sheep someplace. And they thought they were over in one area, Shechem, but when Joesph got over there, he couldn't find them. And a fellow told him to go over by Dathan. And when Joesph got over in that direction, the brothers spied him heading up the trail. And they all started grumbling. Because Joesph never lied to his father, because he was trained to do right. And we know from the history the other brothers weren't quite so honest with Israel. So they conspired. They were going to kill Joesph. But they ended up throwing Joesph in a dry well. And the book of Jasher talks about, in this dry well, there's snakes and scorpions, that Yahweh set up this barrier where they didn't bother Joesph. Just like Daniel was guarded and protected in the lion's den. And we're going to pick this up in verse 28, because it's my job to bring out controversy in Yahweh's name. Because we know the King James isn't perfect, no matter what the Baptists will tell you, and how they'll beat on your brow and tell you it is the preserved word. Then there passed by Midianites, merchants. Now these are the Ishmaelites that lived in the land of Midian. And they drew and lifted Joesph up out of the pit and sold Joesph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. Can I get this one first, please? No. The next one right there. Is that the Septuagint? Yeah. And in the Septuagint, see, the King James says the Ishmaelites paid 20 pieces of silver. But out of the Septuagint, the Old Testament, according to the Vatican text, now please, by Sir Lancelot Charles Lee Breton, barrister. Now, out of 1844, it's got Roman numerals here, 1.DCCC.XLIV, 1844. Next, please. This is the book that was written in Greek, the one that you just had up there. This is the book that was written in Greek about 170 BC, that was to be used by the Edomite Levites, which is really a play on words, that Antioch Epiphanes, when he stripped the temple of the actual children of Levi and set the Edomite Levites up as the priests of the temple in Jerusalem, they couldn't articulate what was written in the Hebrew. That's why the Septuagint was brought about. Excuse me. That's why they brought about the Septuagint, because the Greek could be articulated by the Edomites. This is chapter 37, verse 35. Oh, I'm wrong. This is from the King James. So let's go on, turn the page here, and we'll explain this. Verse 35. And all the sons and all the daughters rose up to comfort Israel after they found Joesph dead. Thought he was dead. And I will go down unto the grave of my son mourning. Means when Israel dies, he's going to take this death to his grave. Thus the father wept for Joesph. And the Midianites sold Joesph unto Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and captain of the guard. Now this is what I just read out of my book. Verse 36. The R is for a reference of a scriptural reference, which would take you to chapter 39, verse 1 of Genesis. But here we've got the N for an officer of Pharaoh, which is a eunuch. But the word does not signify only eunuchs, but also chamberlains, courtiers, and officers. So when you see the word eunuch next time, you've got to expand your thinking. What are they talking about? And then down over here, for the captain of the guard, you've got a double N, which there's a double explanation here. In the Hebrew, chief of the slaughtermen, or the executioner, and the chief marshal. So Potiphar was the number one of the executioners. He was the general. I just thought I'd bring that up. Next, please. Now what we're going to go to here, this is from the Septuagint. Genesis chapter 37, 38. And the men, the merchants of Midian, went by, and they drew and lifted Joesph out of the pit and sold Joesph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of gold. Now there's a controversy between what it says and see, the Septuagint is most normally one chapter ahead than what it is in the King James. So over here in chapter 37, 28, it talks about silver. The Septuagint is talking about the same number of pieces of gold. Now, I should have brought the verification for this, but in the Testament of Gad, which is spoken about by Josephus, the Testament of Gad says there was 30 pieces of gold. Please. And then we get down here And all his sons and his daughters gathered themselves together and came to comfort Israel. But he would not be comforted, saying, I will go down to my son mourning to the grave, Hades. And his father wept for him. And the Midianites sold Joesph unto Egypt to Potiphar, the eunuch of Pharaoh, captain of the guard. See now how they use the eunuch over here in the Septuagint, as it could have, should have been used in the King James, but they used the word captain just to keep you from having this eunuch controversy, because eunuch also means captain. And Potiphar's name, as we're going to see when we get into the Josephus, Potiphars. So from there, next please. Then we get into chapter 38, where Judah goes off and has his own grandchildren with Tamar. That's interesting. Think about that. Because he has to have his own grandchildren. He adulterated his seed line when he married the Canaanite woman, the Dulamite, which is a Canaanite. But, if you think, he raised up children to his son, which are his grandchildren, no matter how you look at it. Perez and Zara. Zara being the child with the red cord for Scotland, Ireland. Chapter 39. And Joesph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar and the officers of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, and Egyptian, a Hamite, bought him of the hands of the Ishmaelite traders, which brought him down to the land of Ham. So we know the story where Potiphar takes Joesph into his family. Now stop and think. Potiphar's guards over the slaves. How was Joesph chastised in order to worship all the deities of Egypt? Egypt has a whole list of deities that they worshipped. So how was Joesph treated? You have to use your mind eye. He had to have been beaten. He had to have been treated severely to maintain his chastity to Yahweh, his fidelity to Yahweh, by not worshiping the sun god. The Pharaoh, Ra incarnate. Isn't that strange? The Pharaoh, Ra incarnate in the flesh. Just like the Pope, Christ incarnate in the flesh. Did they copy that from Egypt? Did the Roman Catholic Church copy that concept from Egypt? Now we know that Joesph raised up through Potiphar's household, because everything that Joesph did flourished. He did well, and Potiphar recognized what he did, and he promoted him such. Until the wife came along and messed that up. And she attempted to have infidelis relationship. Not adultery, infidelis relationship. Not fornication, infidelis relationship. That's what happens when you have a sexual relationship outside the family. It's infidelity. Unless you have a child by another race, that's adultery. Genesis 39, we're going to pick this up at verse 7. And the time arrived after these things that Potiphar's wife cast her eyes upon Joesph and said, Lie with me. But Joesph refused, and said unto his master's wife, Behold, Potiphar voweth not what is with me in the house, and he hath committed all that he has to my hands. There is none greater in this house than I. Neither hath he kept back anything from me, except you, because you are his wife. And how then can I do this great wickedness and sin, to have sex with my boss's wife, as a sin against Yahweh? So, it didn't work that day. She kept plying him. Come on, let's have this. Let's do this. One day, the two of them were home alone in one part of the estate. And we'll pick this up at verse 12. And Potiphar's wife caught him by his garment, saying, Lie with me. And Joesph left his garment in her hand and fled, and got out of him. And he got out of there. And it came to pass, when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand, and was fled out of the house, then she called upon the men of her house, and spake unto them, saying, See what this Hebrew has done. Pick this up in verse 17. And she spoke unto Potiphar according to this word, saying, The Hebrew servant which thou hast brought unto us came unto me, and mocked me, laughed at me. And it came to pass, as I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me and fled. Now stop and think. The book says that Potiphar took Joesph straight away to the dungeon, to the prison, and locked him up. But do you think because Potiphar didn't instantly take off his head that he had counsel and a conversation with Joesph to find out Joseph's side of the story? And see right here, it doesn't call in verse 17 and in verse 14, it doesn't call Joesph an Israelite. It calls him a Hebrew, which is perfectly correct. As the Israelite line is starting to be formed, the children of the man called Israel were an Israelite until the children were born. Because remember, Esau is still a full-fledged, full-flown Hebrew. But his offspring are no more Hebrews. They're mutts. They're mongrels. They're half Hebrew and they're half Ishmaelite or Hivites. Mongrels. The design of the one world order today to get everybody to be a sort of a dark brown, slant-eyed mulatto. That's the truth. So while Joesph was in prison spending his time, he encounters the chief butler and he encounters the chief baker, and he interprets the dream that the butler would go back and serve wine to the Pharaoh. But the chief butler's head would be raised from him. Pick this up in chapter 41. And it came to pass at the end of 2 full years that Pharaoh dreamed, and behold, he stood by the river. So Pharaoh's getting into the dream of the 7th fat cow, the 7th thin cow, the 7th healthy grain. It calls it corn in the book, but it's barley, it's rye. They didn't grow corn over in the Canaan land. Corn, 99% of the time, is animal fodder, food for the cows. That's why you see these big boys come out of Iowa. They're all corn-fed, healthy, hot, stocky young men. They've been corn-fed. They grew grain, several types of wheat, barley, rye. And so it was 2 years after Joesph interpreted the dream when he got invited in to interpret Pharaoh's dream. And Pharaoh, he recognized, he didn't call him an alien. He didn't disregard Joesph just because he was a slave or because he was from another nationality, because the Pharaoh at that time was a high-socked shepherd king. And he invited Joesph in because he understood that every star shines different. And in the Shemitic family, they were all very talented with what they did. That's why everything flourished for Joesph. Even though Yahweh's hand is on Joesph, he had to wait for his timing. And possibly Joesph got put in this prison so he wouldn't flee Egypt before his timing had arrived. That's always what I kind of thought. So we pick this up after Joesph gets elevated to the second. We'll pick this up in chapter 42, verse 3. And Joseph's standing up. Now Joesph was 30 years old at this point. But remember, Emmanuel was 30 years old before he started his ministry. See, the age of 30 is very important for the Israelites. A young man at 20 is just barely old enough to enter the army. He's just barely old enough to marry and have a sexual relationship with a woman. It's illegal for a young man of the children of Israel to have sex before 20 years old. That's against the law. And I declare that in this nation today. Raise your children up as they'll be when they're older, chaste. Joesph couldn't go in and hold an office until he's 30 years old. And that's the law of Israel that was brought from Moses. Genesis 42, verse 5. And the sons of... I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's go in here to Josephus. This is the works of Flavius Josephus. Forgive the dark spot over here. I just couldn't break the back on this book to get it correct. Now, please. The works of Flavius Josephus from Volume 1, 1895. Next, please. See, Joesph has always been symbolically thought about as the Savior, the Christ, the equation of the Christ. And so, in chapter 6 of this, how Joesph, when he was become famous in Egypt, had his brethren in subjection. Joesph was now grown up to be 30, and there again, I couldn't break the back, so I had to insert a few letters as we go through this. Was grown up 30 years of age and enjoyed the great honors from the king, who called him Faustam Phoenicia, out of regard to his prodigious degree of wisdom, for that name denotes the revealer of secrets. He also married a wife of very high quality, for he married the daughter of Potiphar's. Now remember, Potiphar and the Septuagint was referred to as Potiphar's, and one of the priests of Heliopolis. So now over the course of time, Potiphar had elevated himself as a priest of Heliopolis. She was a virgin. Now he's 30 years old, and we know by the book that he didn't have sex with Potiphar's wife. So, a 30-year-old virgin. Can you imagine that? In today's world, a 30-year-old virgin? And her name was Joesph. Now, this is just reference, follow, this is the next verse past 91. She was, by her, he had children before the scarcity came into the land. Manasseh the elder, which signifies forgetfulness. Oh, please. We'll carry that on in a moment. But now right here, this is double column in the book. That is bought the grain for Pharaoh at a very low price when it's talking about the 1/5 portion that was to be given to the Pharaoh. It was purchased. Now this down here is a continuation on the next page from what we're going to read now. This Potiphar, or as Josephus Petiphares, who was a high priest of On, or Heliopolis, is the same name in Josephus and perhaps in Moses' also. And with him who is before called a head cook or a captain of the guard, and to whom Joesph was sold in Genesis 37 and Genesis 39, with 4750. They are also affirmed to be one and the same person in the Testament of Joesph, section 18. For he is there said to have married the daughter of his master and mistress, nor is this a notion peculiar to that testament, but as Dr. Bernard confesses, see the note in Antiquities 2.4.1, common to Josephus, to the Septuagint interpreters, and to other learned Israelites of old time. This entire ignorance of Egyptian of these years of famine before it arrived. Now we're going to get to this on the next page. The entire ignorance of all the Hamites that worked the land, were farmers, of the 7 good years or the 7 bad years. They had no idea. That's what this is trying to tell you here, is they had no idea that a famine was going to show up. As well as here by Josephus, seems to me almost incredible. It's in no other copy that I know of. Next, please. Carrying on in Josephus. We left off where Manasseh's forgetful because his present happiness, Joesph, present happiness made him forget his former misfortunes when he was thrown in the pit, when he was thrown into jail. And Ephraim, the younger, which signifies restored, because he was restored to the freedom of his forefathers. Now after Egypt had happily passed over the 7 years according to Joseph's interpretation of the dream, the famine arrived upon them in the 8th year, and because this misfortune fell upon them when they had no sense of it, now that's beforehand, that's the footnote that we read momentarily ago. They were all sorely afflicted by this famine, and went running to the king's gates. And he called upon Joesph, who sold the grain to them, being confessedly a savior to the whole multitude of the Hamites. Nor did he open his market of corn for the people of the land of Ham only, but strangers, family that traveled there, had liberty to buy also. Joesph being willing that all men who are naturally akin. See, this, what it's saying here is, this is the family of Joseph, whether it be from Canaan land or whether it be from Libya. They're all Hamites, they're all Ishmaelites, and the Japhites were all up north of the Mediterranean. So, Joseph being willing that all his family, who are naturally akin to one another, akin, family, should have assistance from those that lived in happiness. So, this is what Joseph did. This is why Joseph is looked on as a savior. But his saving abilities here were only to the children of the man Noah and his descendants. The Ethiopians are not from down south in the Middle Eastern part of Africa in the day of Joesph. They were up there on the Mediterranean seaboard as part of that landmass up there that all the children of Ham settled. Well, we didn't get through this all today, but I've got something different next time, and I'll have to finish this another time. Because as we finish this Catholicistic year of 2014, and then right at the start of the dead season, and they call it a brand new year, that I'm going to have something different next time. So, but Joseph is not any more Savior to the whole world in that day than Emmanuel is a Savior to the whole world in this day. There's a family. There's a ladder of values in the society today that says what was totally immorally wrong 50 years ago is to be accepted and fed to our children, and there's even pornography going on in the elementary schools today that needs to be stopped. If the parents didn't have to work 2 or 3 or 4 jobs just to maintain the lower end of the middle class scale, because all our jobs have been somehow outsourced to the communist world. Communist China, Communist India, and other places. So, Joseph was not the Savior of the world. Not all the people in that area got the gray. Oh, but I imagine on the Hollywood movies they'll show all different colors of people in there, because that's the only way to change the ladder of values, is to flash it in front of your eyes, hypnotize you to believe something that's incorrect. Fallacies woven in the fabric of truth till you can't figure out the difference between good and evil, till you cannot figure out the difference between the hypnotized evil as good and the hypnotized good as evil. Are your pastors helping you? Are your pastors over in the Judea FEMA churches leading you into the ditch, into mongrelization? Are they making you accept the homosexuality? And if they are, you need to abandon those corporate churches. If you do not abandon those corporate churches, they'll still function. Story of Joseph, Part 2. Oh, please. Yahweh's Name Witness, done for Public Service Television, December 20th, 2014. May Yahweh raise Ezekiel's dead bones, so be it.